So I would like to now talk to Sam McDowell. And Sam, again, thank you for coming. I am thrilled that we now have the balance of the football and the baseball.
The real athlete.
Exactly.
Understood.
Yeah,
Just kidding. Just kidding.
I hope you get to the part where he struck out Babe Ruth.
Oh.
I admit that I'm old, but not quite that far back.
I want to start
Besides, I did strike him out. I walked him.
You were in the Major League Baseball very young, 18, I believe.
17.
17.
I got signed when I was 17. Pitched my first game in the major leagues when I was 18.
That's like almost, that's unheard of, actually.
3 players ever signed and played in the majors younger than me. I was with Cleveland for 10 years, then went to San Francisco for 2, then to the Yankees for 2, then to Pittsburgh. And that was it.
And that was that. So with that, strict athletes, tell us your story. Why are we talking about drug rehabilitation, drug prevention with you?
Well, basically and simplistically, I was born an alcoholic. But in my particular case, I come from a Catholic family, a very religious mom and dad, and what have you, and here I turn out to be an alcoholic. When I got to the Cleveland Indians, first of all, when I was in high school, my senior year, I had 3 or 4 scouts that were at my graduation in high school wanting to sign me. And I wanted to become a doctor, to be quite frank with you. And I had straight A's throughout school, never missed a day of school in my life. But that had to do with me wanting to be different, wanting attention. And so the minute they offered money, that changed real quick. I put down my operating tools and my operating gown and put on the uniform. And they sent me to Lakeland, Florida, D-ball. All the athletes that were around me, they'd have a beer or 2 after the game or what have you. I wouldn't. That's part of being different, wanted to be different. And I was obsessive to the point where I made sure that I had blood tests taken. Do I have the right vitamins in me? Do I have the right enzymes? So on and so forth. And that's the way I went for my first 3 years in the major leagues. I didn't drink. And then all of a sudden, in the major leagues, back in those days, you had to earn your way. You were ostracized until you earned your way in the big leagues. Nobody talked to me. We didn't go out to dinner together, what have you. I was all alone.
Mm-hmm.
But then the 3rd year in the big leagues, I'm in Chicago, and I can remember it to this day. I was brought in relief in the first inning and pitched a 1-hitter the rest of the time. Won the game, and after the game was over with, 2 of my teammates came up to me and said, "Hey, Sam, you want to go to dinner?" And Gary Bell and Barry Lampman. I said, "Yeah, I'll go." And I was as happy as, get on a log.
Like, you've made it. The guys are asking you to dinner.
And we went to Jim Diamond's. I can remember it to this day in Chicago. It's a steakhouse. And we sit down to dinner, and the one guy orders a scotch on the rocks. I said, "Oh, I have one of those too. Want to be just like him." And the other guy ordered some kind of a fancy drink. I still to this day don't know what it was. It was pink. But I ordered one of those too. And we had dinner and had a couple drinks, what have you. And typical, they all went back home to the hotel and went to sleep. I didn't. I went on to other bars throughout Chicago and got home stoned. And didn't know how I got there, but I got back to my hotel room and went to bed and felt terrible the next day. So what was the first thing that we did was in the clubhouse, we had these big pharmaceutical bottles of amphetamines. And depending on what color you wanted. Greenies or yellow ones or red ones. But I like the big black beauties. They were the powerful ones. So I'd take a handful of those and take a cup of coffee, get it going, and go out and do the exercises and workouts and what have you pre-game, and I was fine. And throughout my career, I was what's known as a periodic drunk. I would function to the point of, after my game that I would pitch, I would go out and get blitzed. And the next morning show up, and I would get into the whirlpool with hot water thinking I would sweat it out and go out, work out, do exercises and what have you. We had running and what have you. And then the next night after the game, I would go out and get blitzed again. But then for 2 days before I'm going to pitch, because I was scheduled as a starter every 4 days, so I could time it. And so for the 2 days that before I was going to pitch, I would not drink anything alcohol. I would take my vitamins every day. I would take my enzymes. I still would take amphetamines once in a while just to perk me up, okay, because I like that feeling. And then I'd go out and pitch my game 2 days later and then start the whole ritual over. And I did that for 14 years in the major leagues. The trouble was it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I was smart enough, and this may sound weird, but I was smart enough to know something was wrong. I didn't know what it was. And after my third year in the major leagues, I started to make money. My first 3 years, I made $6,000 a year. That was my total salary for the year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But after that, and I started to perform, I started to make enough money where I was married at the time, and we were going to have a child, and I didn't have to work in the wintertime.
You worked in the off season.
I worked in the off
Early on.
season, yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
okay. So this is the
I was a
beginning.
runner
Yeah.
in a steel mill. You know, in Pittsburgh, we're noted for steel mills. And at Homestead Steel Mill, where my dad worked for 39 years, I got a job there in the wintertime being a runner. During the wintertime, I knew something was wrong. But I kept thinking it was possibly a mental illness or something crazy. It was weird because my whole life with discipline, I was great. Even to this day, I was great. And I couldn't figure out why I couldn't control this. Now, I didn't have to drink every day. I didn't. The minute I took a sip, I was off and running. There was no sign. I could never understand, in fact, to this day, I still don't understand, how a person could take 1 or 2 sips from a drink, set it down, and leave. To me, that's unconscionable. I mean, I'd kill for that.
Wasting
you
it.
know. But I would go through these periods, and something was wrong. So in the wintertime, fortunately, I come from Pittsburgh, where they started the tri-semester at Duquesne University at Pitt. And I had a very close friend who used to be a parish priest, but he became the director of the psychology department at Duquesne University. I would go down to talk to him periodically. I knew something was wrong. And I wanted to get it fixed because it was bothering me. It was handicapping me, pitching and everything else. I originally went to learn sports psychology, but you can't do that. I didn't know that. You know, you got to get basic psychology.
So you were
first.
looking for answers for yourself, but also just because that's the type of guy you are. You really wanted to understand so that you
Yeah.
could be in control.
Yeah, yeah. But to solve the problem. And it kept getting worse and worse and worse. It was getting to the point now I even had my manager starting to talk to me about drinking too much. And in order for me, remember, with an alcoholic, that's our lifeblood. And, you know, like in your normal basic survival mode, you know, you got to have, you know, food, clothing, shelter, sex, and so on to survive. I didn't care about any of those. I just wanted my booze. Okay. And I had to protect that. And so even when I had injuries, I did not want them to say, hey, your drinking's causing those things. I had to protect it, so I kept my mouth shut. And I played with injuries coming out the yin-yang. But I'd take my amphetamines, and once in a while I'd take my pain pills and what have you, but not tell anybody about this, because I had to protect that drinking. But I kept going to the psychologist all the time, and then he would say, well, Sam, you need to go to the library and learn this and learn that. And the minute that he mentioned, Sam, maybe you're drinking too much, I never went to him again. To show you how innovative and intelligent an alcoholic is, I had a new manager come to me, Alvin Dark, and said, Sam, I think you're drinking too much. Would you do me a favor? Would you stop drinking, please, and let's see if it affects you? I said, okay. So I stopped drinking. I lost my first game, lost my second game, lost my third game, lost my fourth game. He came to me one day, he says, Go back to drinking, Sam. Go back to drinking. True story. True story.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
Look at that. Talk about mixed messages. Like we're trying to, tell people, go to people for help, blah, blah, blah. You can do it. But there was no backup. You also had no backup there.
I was married at the time, and my wife was starting to get aggravated because in the wintertime I'd really go berserk with drinking. And so she was starting to give me ultimatums. So I told her one time, okay, I'll prove to you, I'll quit drinking. I don't have a problem drinking. And I did. I quit for a whole year. And I had a great year. But the hell with that, I'm going to go back to drinking.
Because you proved your point?
I proved my point, and I'm going back to drinking. To
You
prove
just went
that,
cold turkey then?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I was a periodic drunk where I could do that, because I didn't drink every single day. So I didn't go into the DTs and what have you like normal. There's a whole lot of incidences that occurred. I mean, I walked into a bar one time that I caused so many problems with that I had the owner come up to me and put a 45 in my stomach. He pulled the trigger and it didn't work. It clicked. Didn't work. I pulled the 45 away, grabbed him by the shoulders, and we went and sat down and both got drunk that night. But I've had many of those incidences happen in my career. I had it once happen to myself. I'm sitting at the house when the second or third time that my wife left me, and she was going to, until I stopped drinking, she was never coming back. So I was sitting in my living room one day, and I just had enough with a depression that comes with addiction and so on. And I'm cleaning my guns. And at one time, I just figured, well, what the hell? And I put shells in the gun, put it up here, and pulled the trigger, never fired. Never fired.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And I said to myself at that point, I can't even do that right, And that was the way my life was.
Wow.
I'm really glad you failed at that.
Well, thank you.
I didn't even know
Thank
that
you.
story.
Yep. Interesting story here. During the wintertime, one time I got drunk. This is after my baseball career. And I drove off a bridge and went over a 150-foot bridge down into what I thought was going to be the river. It wasn't. The day before, Davy tree experts, which chop these trees down into these little fine pieces and everything, they had just emptied 4 trucks next to the river, and there was a big, huge pile.
Uh-huh.
I landed on that pile.
You landed in a feather bed.
I guess
Yes.
sawdust. Yeah.
And my mother came to visit me in the hospital that day, and she said, Sam, she said, haven't you learned that God has better ideas for you? And that hit home. That hit home. But to make a long story short, I just kept getting worse, as it always will happen, no matter who you are as a drunk. And finally, my wife left me, the family left me, I had to sell the house, lost my job. I had a total of 35 cents in my pocket at one time. And I had to make a decision. Do I go get a hamburger? At that time, they were 35 cents. Do I go get a hamburger, or do I put some gas in my car, because I was selling insurance at the time? And do I go sell insurance? And I got the hamburger. And I made it to sell insurance that day. But anyhow, I finally had to move in with my parents. I sold the house, had nothing left. And one day at 4 o'clock in the morning, I get up, and I go downstairs in my underwear, and I make a pot of coffee. And I don't know what the hell's going on, but I'm saying to myself, you son of a bitch, you beat me. You beat me. I don't know what the hell I was talking about.
Yeah.
I had no idea what the hell I was saying. And then I finally remember that I talked to a rabbi that was a psychiatrist in Pittsburgh, Dr. Tversky, probably the foremost authority in the world on addiction. And I talked to him, and I remember him saying something about gateway. I don't know what the hell it was at the time. So to show you how we kind of educate people around us, I get on the phone, call the operator. I said, would you put me in touch with Gateway? Now you got to understand, in Pittsburgh, we have Gateway Towers. We have the Gateway Center.
Sure.
We have the Gateway Point, which is the confluence of the three rivers. We have Gateway High School. We have Gateway Grade School. But I call them, she says, you want Gateway? She said, yeah. She said, I'll connect you. Gateway Rehabilitation Center, which was in Pittsburgh. But the minute I called, and I was sober, and the minute I called and said, I want Gateway, connect me, the operator knew that I needed to go to
She
Gateway.
got that. She
Yeah.
got that from you. She just
Yep.
it came across the line. She
She
got the
knew.
communication
She
that you what you needed.
I went to this rehab center, and the second day there, one of the therapists was giving a seminar on what addiction is, and she told me it's a disease. And the minute I smiled, was thinking about laughing about it, because I thought she was patronizing me. And so after the class, I went up to her and I said, you're really BSing me, aren't you? I said, you're trying to make me feel good. She said, no, it's a disease. Finally, I went back to my room, and I actually sat on my bed for, I'm going to say, probably half an hour. I said, why would she BS me? She's telling me the truth. It really is a disease. And once I grasped that it is a disease, I was off and running. I wanted to know everything about the disease. I wanted to do anything they told me to do.
Gave you a point. It gave you a point of being able to be cause versus
Yeah.
effect, right? You looked at it and you went, I can grab onto this. I can do something about it.
And then they started telling me about this 12-step program, that if I would follow this 12-step program and live it, not talk about it or BS or what, but live the 12-step program, that one, they'll guarantee me to be successful, guarantee me to be happy, guarantee me that I'll actually be able to see beautiful things. Like in my addiction, I could look at a beautiful set of roses, say, so what?
Right.
You know, it's not a big deal.
Because your motivation was really just for the
Not
booze.
just motivation,
Yeah.
but the certain parts of the brain
Sure,
that,
to see
that
it.
you can see the beauty and what have you, we neutralize, okay? We make it numb, okay? And when she said that, I took off like a bat out of hell, and I've been ever since then. And then I decided, with the help of Dr. Torres, to go back to school. So I went back to school for 6 years to learn what the hell I was talking about, and what have you, and I thought I burned every bridge in baseball, because, I mean, I was bad news for any team. I mean, that's the reason why they all got rid of me.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of guys get traded value to value and so on like that. Not in my case. I caused so many problems on the team, and they didn't know how to take care of
No.
it. They didn't know how to deal with it.
No.
I've had general managers come to me over and over and over and say, Sam, we didn't know what to do with you.
Right.
You know, I'm sitting in the wintertime, not knowing where to go, so I go down to talk to Joel Brown, the general manager of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And he says, Sam, he says, we can't sign you. We know you have a drinking problem. I said, Joe, I used to have one, but I took care of it. Don't worry about it, I took care of it. And he had a smile on his face, and he said, well, I'll make you a deal, Sam. He said, I'll take you to spring training. No contract. I'll take you to spring training. And if you behave yourself and you earn a way on the team, I'll sign you. He says, in fact, I'll tell you right now, you tell me what you want to make this coming year. I told him. I gave him a price. He said, okay, let's see what happens. So I go to spring training, and to show you how alcoholism works, I'm still drinking, but I'm hiding it pretty good. He ain't found out about it yet. So one day we get on a plane, we're flying on an off day to LA to play the Dodgers. I'm missing in action for 3 days. I went with a friend of mine in California to a fashion show, got blitzed out of my mind so bad, I was so sick the next day that I stayed in bed. I paid $500 to have a doctor come and to check me out and say I had the flu. We had the written note and everything for Joel Brown and Danny Murtaugh, my manager, and they came up to my room the third day and searched my room looking for booze and what have you. I had 2 bottles, but it was, you know how in a hotel you have an extra drawer, it has all the blankets?
Sure.
I had it hidden underneath the blankets. They looked at the blanket, picked up the first blanket, didn't see nothing, put it down. We went on. We go into New York to play against the Mets. And Bruce Keeson starts a game, and he gets knocked out the first inning with no outs. scored 3 runs already. So they brought me in. I pitch a no-hitter the rest of the game. We win the game. That night, I go out and get so drunk. Next morning, I show up drunk at the field.
Wow.
And I know that I've lost my job, okay? I also know that there's the option clause of baseball was put in. The following year, if I would have stuck around, I'd be a millionaire. The very first player was Oscar Gamble that signed for $1 million from the Cleveland Indians to go to the Yankees because of the option clause. I knew all this. Then I go out and get blitzed.
Couldn't stop drinking.
That's
No control over
alcoholism.
No.
Yeah. Then after baseball's over with and I go back to school, I figured I'd burn every bridge known to man, so I wasn't going back to baseball. And I get a phone call from Bowie Kuhn, the commissioner of baseball. Says, Sam, we've heard that you've gone through recovery and you went to school and blah, blah. We need your help. We got a drug problem. He says, could you design a program for baseball? I said, yeah. So I designed a program for baseball and everything. It took me about a month to put it in terms that he knew how to use it. He calls me up after he gets it, says, Sam, thank you very much, but no thank you. He said, you're addressing alcohol. We don't need you to address that. We got a drug problem.
Ah.
And I said, Bowie, they're both the same. He says, no, they're not. He says, we make too much money from alcohol.
Ah.
You know, all the
So
beer
was that this
signs.
early point where it was black or white?
Yeah.
You're either anti-alcohol or you're selling it at your stadiums, and they
Right.
couldn't find room for.
And don't mess with our revenue.
And I started my teenage counseling system. And I had my own practice in Pittsburgh and everything. And lo and behold, I get a call from the president of the Texas Rangers, Mike Stone. And Mike says, Sam, can you come down to our spring training facility? I would like to hear more about your program, because apparently Bowie Kuhn sent copies of the program I designed for baseball. And he says, we think we want to want to talk to you. And I'm talking him out of it. I said, no, you don't, Mike. I said, you really don't want this program because I address issues that baseball is not ready to handle.
You're not ready
yet.
to confront.
And he said, no, we want you down there. And I said, Mike, please. And he said, come anyhow. So I said, okay. I didn't know he had a degree in law. He had a degree, an MBA. He also had his master's in psychology. His wife was a drug and alcohol counselor for 20 years.
Wow.
I didn't know this.
No, so
Okay.
here you go. You've got the most like-minded individual
Yep.
you could possibly have
And I'm trying to talk him
with
out.
power.
Yeah.
And you're trying to talk him out of
Yeah.
it.
So I go down there with him and talk to him and everything. I talk to the players and everything. And I don't try and BS the players. I lay the cards on the table. I know I'm not going to change any minds and change the way they do life, but just for them to think about a few things. And they loved it. They loved it. There was players that came out of the stands and said, Sam, I smoke a joint every now and then. You know, is that going to cause me a problem? They were open and honest with me. And I thought that was awesome.
But look who you are. I mean, who better to
Just
talk to these
just
guys?
a blue-eyed, handsome guy.
Exactly.
And
A real athlete.
Not very
Yeah,
humble.
a real athlete.
Humble as all get out.
Yeah. Then they signed me, and about 6 months later, I get an emergency call from Joe Garagiola Sr. And he says, Sam, we got a player that's in the middle of committing suicide. And he says, we understand you're the only one that's trained in this. Can you help us? And I said, yeah. I was working for Texas at the time, okay? So I said, get me his phone number. And so they did, and I talked to him, and I stabilized him. We got him help and what have you, and sent him eventually to a rehab. So you do understand that young man is an ordained minister today working with children in trouble.
Look at that.
And about 6 months later, another player is on the 11th floor of a hotel in Nevada in the process of wanting to commit suicide. We stabilized him. So Joe Garagiola calls me up and says, Sam, you're working for us. I said, no, I can't. I got Toronto and I got Texas, and I'm staying with them. You know, they were honest enough with me to let me help them. Whatever. He said, no, you're going to work with us. I said, no, I'm not. But I said, your board meeting that you want me to go to, I will have a list of EAPs and counselors that are trained, certified, have experience, that they can help you. And I'll bring it with. He says, okay. So I go to the board of directors, And there's Bob Gibson sitting there, and Sandy Koufax, and I mean all kind of Super Hall of Famers and lawyers and Indian chiefs and all this. And Joe says, "Thank you for the list." And he stands and tears it up. He says, "You're working for us." And I said, "Joe, I can't. But I'll volunteer."
He didn't say, I'm going to make you an offer you can't refuse, did he?
No.
Okay,
No,
just
I was
checking.
waiting for that. But I said, "I'll tell you what, I'll volunteer for 1 year. And you tell me who and I'll train them. But after that, I'm going to take care of my teams." Well, I've been with them for 36 years,
Wow.
volunteering.
What's the name? I think we want to make sure people know the name of this
The
program.
baseball assistance team,
BAT.
B.A.T, which is MLB.com. And on the opening page, you will see an icon for B.A.T, B.A.T. Just double click on that and it'll tell you all about BAT, what we do, how we do it, why we do it, and so on. And fortunately, we've been extremely successful. And as Randy had said, basically, the moment you walk out of that rehabilitation center or that institution, when you did receive the specialized help, now you have to live it. And now you need people to help you, and that's what it's all about.
There you go.
It's the charity arm of Major League Baseball. And I will say this unequivocally, it's the only form of a program like that that helps the former player, family members, any baseball family member, person in the front office, minor leaguers, wives, children, anybody that's got a problem, psychological, emotional, financial, addiction, whatever it is.
Nice big umbrella. I like that.
We've got the program that we help individuals, and we've got an 85% success rate in recovery. Nobody can come close to that. In fact, that's how I met this ugly guy. We were looking, to be honest with you, there's a game that's going on out there with rehabilitation centers to patronize just to get everybody coming, not necessarily are they guaranteed really focused in on trying to help the individual. But because of my training and because of living it, I know what to look for. So I was looking for special rehabs, and I ran into this guy that was with a rehabilitation center. And the rehabilitation center, it was one of ours we call Clean One, that takes care of the individual, the 12-step program, and everything like this. But more importantly, he's a intervention specialist. And I've run into quite a few of those in my 36 years or 40 years in the counseling business. And I can tell you unequivocally, he's the best I have ever in my life seen.
Oh.
He blows my mind with the way he can get in to an individual. And we desperately needed that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we've been friends ever since, what, 9, 10 years, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So we have BAT. Say what it stands for again.
Baseball Assistance Team Program.
You know, everybody has this illusion that guys leave the league, flush with cash for the rest of their lives, and that's not the case at all, especially in baseball, because so many guys toil through the minor leagues their whole career, never really make it up to the big leagues. And the criteria for BAT to help those guys is, it's not like they have to be vested or anything like that,
Right.
And BAT is there for their families. And I think about this little girl. I saw pictures of her with the scar from the heart transplant, and she's alive today because of BAT.
And their caring.
And their care, right.
I did not know about BAT. So I'm thrilled to just be able to hear that and tell others.
One of the things is that's one of the most difficult problems we have with BAT. Although I say we, I'm still on the board of directors, but I retired last year, and my son, who's a psychologist, took over. But we're confidential, and so we don't want to break any confidential, even have players think that it might leak out. So we don't advertise, we don't say nothing, and that's the hardest thing. Like, we go around the spring training, we talk to the players and ask them to please help us get the word out there. Every player knows somebody that's got a problem and trouble. It could be cancer, it could be financial, it could be like this little girl. Where do we go for this little girl to get her new heart? Where do we go to get this guy prosthesis? We take care of everything for that individual.
This guy came across my life 9 years ago, and since then, I mean, obviously I respect him and admire him for his athletic career, but the things that he's done post-baseball is just mind-blowing. And he doesn't give himself credit for the thousands of former athletes that he's helped since B.A.T started, but even before that.
Sure.
He was already out there doing that, and he's been my mentor. And he was such a great athlete that he should be in the Hall of Fame, and had it not been for alcoholism. And there's still a shot, there's still a possibility. But he was that kind of player.
Framed.
I think we're past that, Sam.
You think?
I think so.
There we go.
I mean, I could be wrong.
Reality sticks its ugly head up.
But he's that caliber of an athlete, and combined with his work after baseball, just a phenomenal individual.
Great.
I can't say enough about him.